My name is Jude, and WWE could have done so much with these guys. So these four sharply dressed men once formed a group called The Hurt Business. You have MVP, a charismatic businessman who walks around with a cane, and he was the manager slash mouthpiece of The Hurt Business. Then you have Cedric Alexander, the high-flying aerial ace of the group. Then there's Sheldon Benjamin, the very talented pure athlete. Then last but certainly not least, Bobby Lashley, the monstrous main event destroyer. Four very talented individuals banding together with one simple goal in mind: bring the hurt to everyone in WWE, make loads of money in the process. And that's it. That's the group. Nothing multi-layered about them. Very simple, but very effective. They would come out looking very nice in their clean suits, with MVP cutting braggadocious yet compelling promos that reminded everyone of what the Hurt Business do. And once they got into the ring, it was all business. So they look good, they talk a big game, and they can back it up in the ring. They're bad guys, but they're entertaining bad guys, and they're bad guys that can get the job done. So you have a cool faction that can entertain the fans and make WWE a bunch of money. But unfortunately, WWE didn't really do anything with them. Sure, WWE gave them titles, but they didn't try to make them actual stars. Superstars that fans would go out of their way to pay big money to see. I mean, from memory, the Hurt Business did a couple of somewhat noteworthy things. They took over Raw Underground, which, I mean, yeah, that was a cool segment, but it didn't really matter because Raw Underground was cancelled shortly after. And also, Raw Underground was a bad show, so yeah, who cares? They had a little feud with the Retribution faction, which, again, it gave another cool segment for the Hurt Business in that they had a massive brawl with Retribution, that one Raw show, but the feud didn't really materialize into anything special. And also, like Raw Underground, Retribution was terrible. So pairing up the Hurt Business with two horrible things didn't really help out the group at all. And the last noteworthy thing they did was they broke up just before WrestleMania. For no reason. Well, there was a reason. Cedric and Sheldon, they lost the tag titles and Lashley and MVP got really mad over it. But from a story perspective, that's not good enough to warrant them breaking up. It was stupid and it should never have happened. The Hurt Business reunited a few months later, but again, that was short-lived because they were all fed to Goldberg. So yeah, the real-life run of the Hurt Business was not good at all. WWE had a money faction in their hands and they just squandered it. But what if they didn't? What if they actually put in the time and effort to make the Hurt Business an amazing faction, and in turn make each member of the group box office stars? Well, lucky for us, we have the joys of fantasy booking to answer that question for us. So, here's how I would have booked the Hurt Business. So in real life, the Hurt Business formed around the middle of 2020, but in this booking, I'm gonna push that back to the end of 2020 because I want to set up some things with each member beforehand. So with Bobby Lashley, I would keep what they did with him in real life the same. He allies himself with MVP, he separates from Lana, and goes on a long journey to revitalize himself as a heavyweight destroyer, with some advice and motivation from his new manager, MVP. The only thing I would change is that I would not have Lashley face Drew McIntyre at Backlash 2020 and lose. I would keep those two guys far apart, put Lashley in the mid-card and have him go on a huge undefeated streak, spend the whole year wiping out that entire division like an unstoppable monster, and win the US title in the process, like in real life. That's what I do with Bobby Lashley. Now, as for Cedric Alexander and Sheldon Benjamin, I would do what they're doing with them in real life right now. Have them completely job out to everyone on Raw. Now, I know that sounds crazy, but don't be scared. I'm gonna use these losses to set up a story for each guy. So throughout 2020, Cedric and Sheldon wrestle on Raw every week, and they just lose, and lose. But in each match, we see just a short glimpse of their special talents. We see glimpses of Cedric's high-flying offense and Sheldon's stunning athleticism before they end up losing bad, and have the commentators play this up. They say that Sheldon and Cedric are very talented athletes, but they're just missing something. We don't know what it is, but whatever it is, we hope they find it out soon. So we've set up a simple story through these jobber matches, in that Cedric and Sheldon are very talented wrestlers, but they're just missing that drive, and that causes them to lose all the time. So now all of these losses suddenly have meaning, and this lets the fans wonder, will things turn around for them soon? And fortunately they do. We get to November 2020, Cedric and Sheldon wrestle together in a tag match, and they lose bad again. After the match, Cedric and Sheldon are having an argument backstage. They're blaming each other for the loss. The argument gets heated and it looks like a fight's gonna break down, until suddenly we hear a voice saying, "Hey! Hey, that's enough, you two!" The two men whip around, and who should they find? MVP, with Lashley in tow. MVP says, "Look at the two of you! You're both an absolute mess! I've been watching you two since the very beginning. Sheldon, you're an amazing talent, and Cedric, you're a former cruiserweight champion. You guys have all the talent in the world. You could do so much in this industry, and yet here you are, looking like losers and whining like little boys. For all the talent you guys have, you lack focus and direction." But not to worry, guys. I can give that to you. What? You don't believe me? Look at Lashley! For the past 3 years, Lashley was lost in the shuffle, just like you guys. Too busy thinking about his sisters, showing his ass to the people, and messing around with Lana. But once we join forces, Lashley has done away with all of that. He's got gold around his waist, and throughout this whole year, he's been undefeated, tearing apart the entire roster. He unleashed his true talent, and that's all because he found drive and motivation through me. Two things that both of you guys lack, two things that I can provide to you both. And look, I'm not presenting this opportunity to you guys from the goodness of my heart. It'll be a mutually beneficial partnership. Lashley and I, we get to expand our business. And you two, your careers will change for the better. Think about it. MVP and Lashley leave the two men alone, and they're left wondering on MVP's proposition. We move to next week's Raw. Cedric and Sheldon have another tag match, and again, they lose bad. Cedric and Sheldon are in the ring after the match. They're looking distraught. The cameras then cut to the stage, and on the stage, we see MVP and Lashley observing the fallen men. Cedric and Sheldon look at the duo on stage, and very slowly, you see their facial expressions change. And just from that change, you can tell that they've made their final decision. They exit the ring, they meet up with MVP, and they extend out their hands for a handshake. They have accepted MVP's offer. A big old smile curls up on MVP's face, and he and Lashley gladly shake Cedric and Sheldon's hand. The Hurt Business has been formed. So throughout the rest of November and December of 2020, we get a bunch of video packages of MVP and Lashley training Cedric and Sheldon. Lashley puts them both through very physical and intense training sessions, while MVP is giving them powerful, motivational speeches. And within these videos, you can see the gears shifting in Cedric and Sheldon's heads. They're finding that drive and motivation to win and become stars. On the last episode of Raw in 2020, we get one more video package. Cedric and Sheldon, again, they're training very hard, and it ends with MVP telling Cedric and Sheldon that he's set up a match for them in the new year, 2021. And he's very confident that the revitalized duo will make a big statement. So Cedric and Sheldon have their first match in 2021, and they completely dominate their opponents. We see Cedric's high-flying skills and Sheldon's one-of-a-kind athleticism in full display. They work together as a focused, cohesive unit, and they win the match in clean and convincing fashion. After the match, Cedric and Sheldon, they're celebrating, they're very, very happy, and Lashley and MVP are at ringside smiling with pride. And from here, the tag team's momentum keeps rising in the coming weeks. They wrestle more matches on Raw, and they just keep winning, winning, and winning. At the Royal Rumble pay-per-view, both guys enter the Rumble match, and together they go on an absolute tear. They survive throughout most of the match, eliminating a bunch of people until they're both eliminated by two top-level athletes, let's say from the top of my head, Edge and Daniel Bryan, just to keep their credibility maintained. But let's not stop with Cedric and Sheldon. Lashley has an amazing showcase at the Royal Rumble as well. He enters the match after Cedric and Sheldon have been eliminated, and he starts mauling everyone, making it to the final four with himself, Randy Orton, Edge, and Daniel Bryan. Lashley runs through each top guy like an unstoppable freight train until Orton, Edge, and Bryan combine forces to eliminate Lashley, thereby keeping Lashley super strong in that it took 3 main event guys to take him out. So while Lashley, Cedric, and Sheldon lost in the Rumble match, they still look very credible in defeat. Moving on to the Elimination Chamber pay-per-view, Cedric and Sheldon face another tag team and they win in convincing fashion. And as for Lashley, we keep the booking that happened in real life, in that he loses his US title belt to Matt Riddle in a triple threat match, and then at the end of the show, he attacks Drew McIntyre after he successfully defends his world title, making it very clear that the Almighty is going after the world title. Side note, with the WWE Championship, The Miz doesn't cash in his Money in the Bank briefcase against Drew McIntyre at Elimination Chamber. Instead, in this booking, Miz cashes it in a few months earlier on Drew McIntyre at the TLC pay-per-view after his match against AJ Styles. So The Miz cashes in his title shot, and Miz fails to win the championship. Drew beats Miz convincingly to retain his title, making him look like a valiant badass in that he defended his title twice in one night. I did this because I want Drew McIntyre to hold on to the world title heading into WrestleMania. So going back to the main topic, the Hurt Business keep their hot streak going, heading into the next pay-per-view, Fastlane. Cedric and Sheldon beat another tag team, and they become the #1 contenders for the Raw Tag Team Championships. And Bobby Lashley defeats Sheamus to become #1 contender for the WWE Championship. So at this point, Cedric, Sheldon, and Lashley, they've all been on this huge winning streak, looking like absolute stars in the process. They've earned a shot at the titles, and now it's time to go big at the grandest stage of them all. At WrestleMania 37, Night 1, Cedric and Sheldon, they open the show and beat The New Day to become the new Raw Tag Team Champions. And in the main event, Bobby Lashley defeats Drew McIntyre to become the new WWE Champion. He beats Drew clean and convincingly without help from the Hurt Business, because he's a badass, and Bobby Lashley should be winning his first world title in front of a live crowd at a big stage, not in front of no fans, for frick's sake! And night 1 of WrestleMania 37 ends with a beautiful shot of the Hurt Business standing in the middle of the ring, holding all the gold. Amazing. This means that Sasha and Bianca, they won't be main eventing night 1 of WrestleMania. That's not a slight to both ladies at all. They're amazing wrestlers. But this booking is all about the Hurt Business, so I'm gonna give them the prime time spots. So the Raw after WrestleMania opens with the Hurt Business. They come out in their nice clean suits with their new titles. MVP grabs the mic and says, "Ladies and gentlemen, business is booming! Lashley, what did I tell you? You stick with me, and one day you become WWE Champion." And look where we are now. And Sheldon said, "Was I wrong about you two?" No sir. With my guidance, these 3 men have embraced their talents and unleashed their true power on WWE. And because of that, they're now the champs. Now I ain't gonna lie, the boys and I, we had a long ass celebration after WrestleMania, and we did a little something with some ladies of the evening, if you catch my drift. But that doesn't mean we lost sight of things. We ain't gonna get lazy. Our mission statement still stands. Bring the Hurt to everyone in WWE and make it big while doing so. So to everybody in the back, you want these belts? Step on up. You just best be aware that things will end bad for you, because we're the Hurt Business. We're the Predators. We're the top of the food chain, and nothing is gonna stand in our way. We fast forward to the Raw main event, and for the first time ever, Bobby Lashley, Cedric Alexander, and Shelton Benjamin wrestled together in a 6-man tag team match. The three men tear the house down with their opponents and they win in dominant fashion. After the match, the Hurt Business, they beat up on their opponents some more just to emphasize their mission statement. And Raw ends with the Hurt Business standing tall in the ring, holding their belts, mirroring the image at WrestleMania 37. And from this point onwards, the Hurt Business essentially run Monday Night Raw in 2021. Every Raw show plays like this. The Hurt Business open the show in their nice clean suits, holding the belts, and they cut a braggadocious promo. Then we get another segment with the Hurt Business around the middle of the show. The segment can be anything really, just so it shows off the Hurt Business's compelling, cool charisma. And in the main event of Raw, the Hurt Business wrestle in 6-man tag matches, and they win every single time. And these 6-man matches, they play out in a very similar way to the Shield's matches way back in 2013, where those matches, they stole the show every single night, and all 3 members of the Shield showcased their unique talents. You take that blueprint and you use it with the Hurt Business. Book them to have the match of the night every week. You highlight Cedric's high-flying skills, Sheldon's amazing athleticism, and Lashley's superhuman speed and power. And all 3 men wrestle together like a well-oiled machine. There's no animosity or miscommunication between them. And of course, after each match, the Hurt Business stand tall with their belts in the middle of the ring to close off Raw. You book the Hurt Business like this every week, and I can assure you they will come off as like bona fide gangster thug badass superstars that people would pay to see. Oh, by the way, that black and gold trim wrestling gear that they would wear, yeah, keep that 100% because that looks damn good. So the Hurt Business run Monday Night Raw pretty much, and that dominance carries over to the pay-per-views. At Backlash, Cedric and Sheldon retain their tag titles against the New Day in a rematch. At Hell in a Cell, they beat Humberto Carrillo and Ricochet. Then at Money in the Bank, they beat Omos and AJ Styles. As for Lashley, like in the mid-card scene, he just tears through the main event scene as the almighty WWE champion. He beats Braun Strowman in dominant fashion at Backlash. Then after that, he rekindles his feud with Drew McIntyre. And the bad blood between the 2 men reaches a breaking point, and so they fight at the next pay-per-view inside Hell in a Cell. They brutalize each other in the match, and in the end, Lashley beats Drew again. Then at Money in the Bank, instead of squashing Kofi Kingston, Lashley defends his title against another top star. A top star like Randy Orton. Throughout the whole match, Lashley just dominates Randy Orton. Randy gets a few spots in there though, even an RKO out of nowhere, but the Almighty proves too much for the Apex Predator, spearing the hell out of him and then making him tap out to the Hurt Lock for the win. This adds so much credibility to Bobby Lashley in that he just took a main event guy like Randy Orton and just munched through him. So the faction's hot streak continues into the summer. At SummerSlam, Cedric and Sheldon defend their tag titles against Matt Riddle and Randy Orton. They have a spectacular match, and Orton and Riddle, they push Ced and Sheldon to the limit. But in the end, Cedric and Sheldon win and retain their titles. And after the match, Cedric and Sheldon, to everyone's surprise, they offer a handshake to Randy Orton and Matt Riddle. They're hesitant at first, but eventually Orton and Riddle, they accept the handshake. The 2 teams shake hands, and then Ced and Sheldon, they raise the other team's hand to show respect. They show off a bit of good old sportsmanship. As for Lashley, he defends his WWE title at SummerSlam against Goldberg, like in real life, with the simple story of the alpha male badass of yesteryear going up against the alpha male badass of the present, and they will fight to prove once and for all who is the most dominant force. Lashley and Goldberg have a super titan slugfest that goes for about 5 minutes. They just run over each other with ferocious explosive power, and in the end, Lashley beats Goldberg clean. Spinebuster, spear, and then a hurt lock for the win, making Goldberg pass out. After the match, Goldberg just manages to get onto his feet by himself, and then Lashley, like with Ced and Sheldon, he offers his hand for a handshake. Goldberg, like Orton and Riddle, he's hesitant at first, but eventually he accepts. the handshake, and then Lashley raises the legend's hand to show respect, who returns the gesture in kind. So for the first time, the Hurt Business has made a babyface move. MVP addresses their actions on the Raw after SummerSlam. He says, "Hey, look, we may be brash and all, but we'll show respect to guys who earn it. Orton, Riddle, and Goldberg, they pushed us to the limit. Mad props to you." And that goes to everybody in the locker room. You give us a good fight, we'll show you respect. So with this promo and the respectful actions they made at SummerSlam, this sort of nudges the Hurt Business from full-blown bad guys into sort of tweeners, anti-heroes. Because I think at this point the fans, they're gonna get behind the Hurt Business because they're so badass despite them being evil dudes. So why not give them a good noble quality to push them into that anti-hero type of role. We move on to the Extreme Rules pay-per-view, and the Hurt Business wrestle against villains, just to further push that anti-hero vibe and to give the audience another reason to cheer them. Sheldon and Cedric, they defend their tag titles against Jinder Mahal and Veer. Ced and Sheldon, they wrestle circles around the big men, and then they retain their titles in clean and convincing fashion. Pissed off at the loss, Jinder Mahal and Veer, they try to attack Sheldon and Ced from behind. But the champs, they see that coming, and they valiantly take down the big evil heels to the applause of the crowd. Then later on, Bobby Lashley defends his title in another match against Sheamus. Lashley and Sheamus, they batter each other in a big physical brawl, ending with Lashley picking up another big win. After the match, Lashley offers a handshake to Sheamus, and Sheamus, he just brushes him off and walks to the back, because he is a big ol' Irish prick. We move on to Crown Jewel in Saudi Arabia, and it's time to give the New Day, the Hurt Business another big showcase. Cedric and Sheldon, they defend their titles in a fatal 4-way ladder match against the Viking Raiders, RK Bro, and Humberto Carrillo and Ricochet. It's a huge, chaotic match filled with fast-paced action, and the match ends with a super cool sequence. There are 2 ladders propped up in the middle of the ring, and Ced and Sheldon, they springboard off the top rope onto the ladders at the exact same time. They climb up and they grab the titles to pick up another big win, looking like spectacular athletes in the process. As for Lashley, he defends his world title against Sheamus, Damian Priest, and Drew McIntyre in a fatal 4-way elimination match. It is a monstrous clash between 4 top-level heavyweight wrestlers, ending with Lashley getting the win by eliminating everyone in the match, making him look like a complete badass. After the match, Lashley shows respect to his opponents, particularly for Drew McIntyre, just to end off their rivalry in 2021 in a nice bow. So by this point, the Hurt Business have been presented as this cool, dominant money faction, with each member being presented as big-time superstars. This sets them up very nicely for what comes next. At Crown Jewel, the main event is the match that happened in real life, with Brock Lesnar fighting for the Universal Champion against the current champ, Roman Reigns. The match plays out like it did in real life, with Roman getting the win with help from the Usos. And as they make their way up the ramp, Reigns grabs a microphone. He says, "The Tribal Chief has conquered Brock Lesnar, and the Usos, they've conquered the tag team division. The Bloodline run Crown Jewel. The Bloodline runs SmackDown. The Bloodline runs WWE. Nothing can stop us. The Bloodline is the greatest faction of all time." And that is when the Hurt Business music hits. Lashley, Cedric, Sheldon, and MVP, they all enter the stage and they confront the Bloodline. MVP stands opposite to the Special Counsel, Paul Heyman. The Raw Tag Team Champions, Cedric and Sheldon, they stand toe-to-toe with the SmackDown Tag Team Champions, the Usos. And the almighty WWE Champion, Bobby Lashley, stands face-to-face with the Universal Champion, Roman Reigns. And Crown Jewel ends with a wide shot of these 2 dominant factions having this amazing standoff. This leads to an epic interbrand mega match at Survivor Series. The Hurt Business versus the Bloodline, with the Hurt Business representing Raw and the Bloodline representing SmackDown. Champions versus champions. Title unification, with the winning team becoming the undisputed tag and world champions. During the build-up, Sonya Deville and Adam Pearce, they grant each faction the ability to float between shows. The Hurt Business show up on SmackDown and they run roughshod, and the Bloodline does the same thing on Monday Night Raw. And during the lead up, we get some sweet interactions between the Hurt Business and the Bloodline. Ced, Sheldon, and the Usos, they size each other up over who's the better tag team. MVP and Paul Heyman, they get into these jaw-dropping promo wars to build up each faction and to make this feud really big. And of course, Bobby Lashley and Roman Reigns, they have these big alpha male face-to-face encounters with cool trash talking thrown in the mix, because I think both guys are very capable of doing that. Then finally, we get to the big match at Survivor Series, and it's gonna be the stuff of legends. The Hurt Business and the Bloodline, they collide in an all-out war. And look, this is just for me, but in this match, I want a sequence where Lashley takes on the Bloodline by himself, and he fights them like a one-man army, because by God, Lashley is amazing and everyone needs to know that. In the final act, the Hurt Business gained the advantage over the Bloodline, and it looks like they're gonna win. People are losing their minds. And do the Hurt Business win? No, they don't. Through dirty tactics and heel chicanery, the Bloodline beat the Hurt Business, with Roman Reigns pinning Cedric Alexander. After the match, the Bloodline, they barely manage to walk up the ring, just to sell the beating that they took at the hands of the Hurt Business. But despite all that, the Bloodline, they have big smiles on their faces, because they have got 2 championship belts. Survivor Series ends with the Bloodline posing on stage with all of their belts as the new undisputed champions, with the Hurt Business staring them down from the ring with venom. The feud ain't over yet. So on the Raw show after Survivor Series, the Bloodline, they make another appearance. And just to further cement their status as the new undisputed champs, they are presented with brand new championship belts. And look, since this is my booking video, just give them the old WWF belts, because the old WWF tag team belts, they look much better than the silver belts that they have now. And the Winged Eagle WWF title, that is the best looking belt in all of professional wrestling. I will die on that hill. So the Bloodline, with their new belts, they go to cut a victory promo, which then gets cut off by the Hurt Business. They sprint towards the ring and the 2 factions get into another big fight, with the Hurt Business sending the Bloodline packing. This leads to 2 big matches at WWE's new pay-per-view, Day 1. The first match being the Usos defending their new undisputed tag belts against Cedric Alexander and Shelton Benjamin. They had an amazing tag match, and it looks like Ced and Sheldon are gonna pick up the win. But of course, the Usos, those rascals, they cheat to retain their belts. And in the main event, the Almighty takes on the Tribal Chief in a big one-on-one match for the new WWE Undisputed Championship. And throughout the match, they tell this one story. Bobby Lashley is by far the strongest opponent that Roman Reigns has ever fought. Roman throws everything he has at Bobby Lashley, who just takes it and brings the fight back to Roman Reigns. He shrugs off a Superman punch, kicks out of many spears, and he powers out of the guillotine choke. Lashley is just too much for the Tribal Chief, which is gonna make everyone think, hold up, is Bobby Lashley gonna be the guy to beat Roman Reigns? And to answer that question, no, he doesn't. In the end, Reigns just barely manages to get the win over Lashley, with help from the Usos and Paul Heyman. It takes the entire Bloodline faction to overcome the Almighty. In the last act of the match, the ref goes down, leading to the Usos running down the ring, and they just beat up on Bobby Lashley. But the Almighty, the badass that he is, he fights them off. Cedric and Shelton, they enter the fray, and they take the Usos out of the ring, and they brawl to the back. And then Paul Heyman enters the ring, and he tries to hit Lashley with the undisputed belt. But Lashley just snatches Heyman like he's nothing, and he locks him in to the Hurt Lock. Lashley is making Heyman pay for his mistake. But this leads to Roman Reigns sneaking up on Lashley. He grabs the undisputed belt and he thwacks it over Lashley's head. Roman then follows up with one more spear to get the big win. Now I know this booking is about the Hurt Business, but I do not want to ruin this Thanos megastar run that Roman Reigns is having. He shouldn't be taking any losses at this point, so yeah, unfortunately the Hurt Business, they're gonna take the L. So yeah, the Hurt Business have lost 2 big pay-per-view matches back to back, but they still looked amazing in these matches, and I'm still gonna keep them credible, very credible, after these losses. So on the Raw show after day 1, the Hurt Business opened the show with another 6-man tag match, and just like every other match, they dominate and win. After the match, MVP grabs a microphone and says something like this: "At day 1 and that Survivor Series, the Hurt Business lost big. That's straight up facts. But that doesn't mean we're gonna sit here and cry and bitch about it. We're gonna acknowledge our losses, pick ourselves up, learn from our mistakes, and get better. Because no matter what happens, one fact will always remain. We are the Hurt Business, and we bring the hurt. We're gonna climb back to the top, and one day, we're gonna be champs again." And to Roman Reigns, to the Usos, and to everybody else back there, you get in our way? You better be ready. So with this promo and the 6-man tag beforehand, we maintain the Hurt Business's top level credibility and main event star power. That way, the fans can still get invested in the super cool gangster thug badass faction that is the Hurt Business for whatever comes next. And that concludes the booking. The Hurt Business have an amazing journey in this booking. They get a cool little prequel setup with Lashley dominating the mid-card and Cedric and Sheldon suffering huge big losses until they're reinvigorated by joining forces with MVP and Bobby Lashley. They have one of those hold all the gold moments at the biggest stage in them all, the main event of WrestleMania. They go on to dominate 2021 as a badass gangster group that essentially rules Monday Night Raw, and they cap off the year with a big box office feud with the Bloodline. And throughout all of this, the Hurt Business come off as this huge, awe-inspiring, larger-than-life faction, with each member of the group coming off as these top-of-the-line superstars that everyone will want to pay to see. So, that's it for the video. If you guys have any thoughts, feel free to lay them down in the comment section below. But yeah, that's it. Till next time, see you later.